Dino Prizmic is something special. We saw that last night. Day one, Australian Open 2024, Rod Laver Arena. He makes his slam main draw debut against Novak Djokovic at 18 years old as a qualifier out of Croatia. Won the Roland Garros Junior Boys Championship a season ago. And he loses in 4 sets against Novak Djokovic in about 4 hours. And that in itself is not that big a deal. Enzo Cuoco took a set off of Novak, round 1 of the Australian Open. The year before, Sun Woo Kwon took a set off of Novak Djokovic, round 1 of Wimbledon. The year before that, well, Djokovic played a guy named Jack Draper in the first round of Wimbledon. Draper took a set, and just like Dino Prizmic, he was making his slam main draw debut. And then at the next major, Novak would go up against a guy named Holger Rune, making his slam main draw debut. And Rune as well took a set off of Novak Djokovic. Now, obviously, Draper and Rune, they left everybody who watched those matches pretty impressed. They showed some stuff, some skill, some talent, some ability. And they had some success against Novak Djokovic. That left an impression. And sure enough, fast forward a couple of years, and they are 2 great prospects in this sport, sure, at different stages. But even if I compare it to Draper and Rune in 2021, what we saw last night is a couple notches above. This is the most enchanted that I have been by a slam main draw debut. And I am not putting a stake in the ground and saying that from watching that one match, Prizmic is going to be better than Draper, Prizmic is going to be better than Rune. But what I can tell you is the experience of watching the match last night, just that, in a vacuum, left a greater impression on me than those 2 debut efforts back in 2021 that I remember watching very carefully. And in the case of Holger Rune, watching in person. There is some eye test stuff with Prizmic that is can't miss, that is undeniable. And I like to trust my eyes when it comes to these things. With a healthy level of skepticism, with an understanding that, okay, one match is one match. We got to see it in different conditions. We got to see it against different opponents. We got to see it over a consistent period of time, over long stretches of time. Sure. But there are also some things that I saw last night that are never going to change. And it starts with the spectacular athleticism that Dino Prizmic put on display. The speed around the court, the ability to maintain the highest level of effort and energy over and over again, point in and point out, playing long rallies often, defending often. He did it for 4 hours, and he still had a lot of juice left in those batteries when they shook hands at the end of the match. I'm not going to tell you the battery was 100% full, but there was plenty of charge there. Especially if you look at the way that he competed from down 4-love in that 4th and final set. Ended up losing at 6-4. More on that later. So Prizmic, he's got a pair of legs on him. I don't know how else to put it. And certainly visually, he put that out for the world to see with the length of his shorts. But it's not just for show. The way he was moving, the endurance and the speed, and even the footwork was top-notch stuff. But some people have that movement around the court, and they show those things, but there are certain drawbacks when it comes to their athletic makeup. Maybe they don't have that fast twitch explosiveness that takes away what they can do when it comes to their ground stroke speeds or their serve speeds. Jaume Munar is someone who comes to mind. He moves great. He's got fantastic stamina. But he lacks explosiveness when it comes to striking the tennis ball. And I think that is partially just his fast twitch explosiveness, and his power is lacking. And then there are some others who are vertically challenged. That comes with its own stuff. You think of maybe an Alex de Minaur. Prizmic is 6'2", and he's got plenty of that explosive power. I can't even nitpick the athletic specimen that Dino Prizmic is. I can't nitpick it. He's got everything when it comes to the ideal athlete that you want a tennis player to be. Period. And the only recent frame of reference for this kind of athletic specimen at that age, 18 years old, is Carlos Alcaraz. That is the only recent frame of reference I can give you. But there are some ways that I don't want to compare Prizmic to Alcaraz. I think their personalities as tennis players are quite different. And that kind of brings me to the next thing I want to talk about in regards to Prizmic, which is that he's got a game that is built to use his legs as a primary weapon. Not the only weapon, not the only thing he brings to the table on a tennis court, but he has a game that is predicated around using his movement as a primary weapon. And that is through a marriage of movement with fitness and rally tolerance. These things that are all related and come together in one package. And Prizmic brings a ball machine-like consistency. Never felt last night that he was going to make an easy unforced error at any point. You always trusted that the ball was going to come back into play unless Djokovic put him in an immense amount of pressure. And he does that through a heavy, high RPM forehand that has the revolutions that enable him to play with a lot of net clearance. On the backhand, it's a very different story. Same result, it's ultra consistent. But it's a very short, quiet take back. Flat backhand with great depth control. Again, the word I like to use on the technique is quiet. Doesn't seem like a lot can go wrong. There are some aspects of the technique that probably take away the potential for power. There's not that huge take back. There's not that big involvement of the snapping of the left wrist or the engagement of the left arm. But it is, to me, actually the platonic ideal of what you want a backhand to be in terms of a bulletproof shield that is maybe not going to win you a ton of points, but it's not going to cost you like so many backhands on the tour do to other players. It's a net negative side for so many players. The backhand for Prizmic is a rock. It's got great depth control, and it is difficult to attack, and it rarely misses. Prizmic has a disciplined shot selection. Rarely, if ever, did I see him making low percentage decisions in his baseline game. How often am I here talking about young players especially, saying, all right, they don't really have that decision-making stuff down yet. They'll get it eventually. They'll mature, maybe when they're 21, maybe when they're 22. Heck, maybe it'll take, like Daniil Medvedev, maybe it'll take until they're 23 or 24 before they get that part down. Prizmic has it right now. And then there's a skillfulness and a willingness to defend. So much of defense is mentality. So much is mindset. In order to defend well, you have to want to defend. Prizmic likes it. Prizmic embraces the defensive aspect of the game. This, to me, is the bedrock of what we saw in like a young Novak Djokovic and a young Andy Murray and even a young Rafa Nadal. But to me, it's become lost in young players. I've rarely seen this. I've rarely seen a young player with this makeup, and I've wondered for a long time, am I going to see another young player who comes up and immediately is someone who values consistency. And you have to be pretty elite athletically, like those three that I just mentioned are/were. But is there going to be a young player who I feel like above all else values consistency? Prizmic is that guy. And usually when you have that kind of play style, it goes along with a mentality that embraces hard work and a warrior mentality. Not always, but man, a lot of the times these things go together, right? How could you be someone who likes to play long points and is really disciplined from the back and embraces the defensive side of the game and doesn't have that warrior mentality, right? Those two things don't really fit together. Usually those puzzle pieces, those Tetris pieces do go together. And for Prizmic, that is the case. Mentally, we saw some great things last night. I'll start here. His game didn't change under pressure. He was the same guy when it comes to the decision-making process. He was the same guy no matter what the scoreboard says. And that's what you can control, right? If a player gets tight and lacks some execution or misses a shot here and there, what are you going to do? It happens. But one thing that I look for is, do you play the same way? Are you able to implement your style in all circumstances, or do you get away from what you do best under pressure? Prizmic was the same guy. In that second set tiebreak, he was a rock, just like he was throughout the rest of the set. But I think the most impressive thing was his refusal to accept defeat in set number 4. That's the best thing we saw from Prizmic mentally, because he was down love 4, 30-40 in the 4th set. Would have been so easy for him to just say, okay, Novak, he's the greatest, and he's just too good. And I did amazing to play him close tonight. And I did myself justice, and I gave this crowd a show. But surely, I've lost now. So let's just chill out. Let's take our foot off the gas. And let's get to the locker room here. Instead, he hits 2 aces. He hits a serve +1 forehand winner to hold. Then he plays a rock-solid return game and breaks serve to make it 4-3. Then at 3-5, he's facing love 40, saves 3 match points, saves another, ends up saving 4 match points in the 3-5 service game to make Djokovic serve it out. Why was he able to play Djokovic so well, play Djokovic so tight? I'm kind of done talking about Prizmic in a vacuum. Those are my impressions on his performance last night. But as far as his matchup against Djokovic goes, he played Djokovic like Medvedev does. The only difference was Novak couldn't get forward all the time. So, Prizmic really challenged Novak to find finishes, and Prizmic tried to wear him down physically, and he tried to play Novak backhand to backhand and just stay patient in that pattern and try to make it a physical war. And Prizmic has the movement to do that and the consistency to do that, just like Medvedev has those assets in order to do that and go toe-to-toe in that style game with Novak Djokovic. And as we've covered, Novak is not a titan of endurance anymore. This style can work if you have what it takes. The big difference between Prizmic and Medvedev was, we've seen how Djokovic has solved the Medvedev problem in those moments. Djokovic would have lost the second set in the U.S. Open final against Medvedev if he didn't have the ability to come forward and win points at the net pretty much on command, especially on service points. Well, Prizmic, he takes the ball early enough, especially the return of serve early enough, kind of shuts down that aspect of things. And Novak for the match was only 20 of 30 at net. It's all right. It's decent. But in terms of net rush frequency, I think for Novak, ideally, it would have been a little bit higher. And even when it comes to net rush effectiveness or net rush efficiency, ideally for Novak, it would have been a little bit higher. For me, the credit goes to Prizmic and the way his game was able to deter that. So, that is kind of the issue that Djokovic was, I think, running into, particularly in the second set, where it was the forehand wasn't firing. It was a bad forehand set for Djokovic in the second set, and the start of the third set, for what it's worth. Forehand wasn't effective enough. So the forehand isn't firing. The backhand isn't going to be a finishing weapon from the back of the court. The net rushing isn't really there. The first serve isn't carrying me. Novak had no way to get out of that Prizmic web of shot tolerance, rally tolerance, terms I use interchangeably. So in the second set, Prizmic wins points over 9 shots, 10-7. And then the other rally lengths are tied. And then in set 3, which was also a highly competitive set, Prizmic wins rallies over 9 shots, 13-7. For the match as a whole, rallies over 9 shots were 35-36. Prizmic was right there with Novak in those extended rallies, and Djokovic pulled away in the 5-8 and, more than anything, the 0-4 rally length. But it was when Djokovic didn't have the forehand going to create enough offense, especially early in points behind his serve. That was when he was really having issues separating himself from Prizmic. Eventually, the forehand clicked. Novak also started getting craftier in rallies. I do think the net rush frequency rose a little bit. There were more drop shots from Djokovic. There were more short slices from Djokovic, which he used in a couple of moments in a big way to get out of jams. And Novak found a way. Novak's reaction after the match spoke volumes. He was imploring the crowd to acknowledge Prizmic's effort. He was telling Prizmic to take a curtain call because he felt that Dino deserved that moment of acknowledgement with the crowd. Clearly, Prizmic had earned Novak Djokovic's respect. So again, I got to see him in different circumstances against different opponents. I need to see Prizmic's rate of improvement because that is, above all else, the thing I value when it comes to young players. How good are you at improving? How quickly do you improve? That ultimately determines how great a champion you can become. That is why I became so high so quickly on Jannik Sinner and Carlos Alcaraz. But I am absolutely delighted with what we saw last night because it has the makings of what could be another tremendous addition to the ATP Tour with a phenomenal talent, a special player in Dino Prizmic. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.